To the Green Business Fund's Managing Energy as a Controllable Source webinar. My name is Charlotte Holsworth, as Penny mentioned, and I work for the Carbon Trust as an energy efficiency expert. During the webinar today, we'll be learning more about how to embed good energy management practices within day-to-day activities. It should help your business to realise opportunities for energy and cost savings. From the Carbon Trust experience, many organisations can reduce energy bills by up to 10% through better energy management. But first, for those who do not know the Carbon Trust, we're a not-for-profit organisation with the mission to accelerate the move to a sustainable low-carbon economy. We're an independent business who provide advice to businesses, governments and the public sector. We provide footprinting services to organisations as well as products and services. And in addition, we help develop and deploy low-carbon technologies and solutions. So what are the barriers for SMEs? SMEs often have barriers for energy efficiency. Many find it difficult to find time to commit to savings. Many do not know where to start. Many lack the expertise within the business, and sometimes the money is an issue for investment. In addition, businesses sometimes do not have full control over the building as it is tenanted, as well as tenants and staff not wanting to participate in energy saving measures. Today's webinar will hopefully look at overcoming some of these common barriers, and in particular understanding what can be done at a low/no cost basis. So today the webinar will be covering the following topics: so implementing an energy policy, developing an energy plan, best practice on data tracking, setting reduction targets, engaging employees, next steps for successful energy management, and I will lastly go through what the Green Business Fund is and what services are offered through the fund. I will also go through what our SME network also provides. As Penny mentioned, we will aim to cover questions at the end of the webinar. So I think it's best to start by explaining why we need energy management. So all organisations need good management for long-term success, and energy management should be no different. A bonus is that it can have potential to save energy as well as reduce costs. Making sure a structured, coordinated and integrated approach to energy management helps to reduce energy consumption. However, it must be tailored to the nature and the size of the organisation or business. Installing energy efficient equipment such as LEDs, upgrading your HVAC system or insulation can achieve savings, but without a structure, this will be a short-term change. Studies show that aside from cost savings, benefits such as health improvements, productivity boosts and enhancing business image can be achieved. As SMEs are a central part of the business chain, energy savings can be appealing to customers and larger buyers in today's market. Nowadays, many large organisations are even asking suppliers for evidence for sustainability before they become accredited suppliers. So if we begin about going through implementing an energy policy. So what is an energy policy? An energy policy usually consists of a one-page document which is signed off by senior management, which shows the business is committed to improving its environmental performance by reducing its emissions. It can provide a foundation for best practice in energy management. An endorsement from senior management is important to be included in the energy policy. This shows that the organisation has a clear focus of what the objectives are for the organisation, and the management is taking ownership and acknowledges something needs to be done in regards to energy and carbon. It should also express the carbon and energy vision and aspirations, for example, going beyond legal requirements, setting quantitative targets or commitments to developing targets, maybe even look to external recognition, maybe going down the route of ISO 15001. The commitment should encompass the developing and maintaining of an energy plan or strategy, sufficient resource is being put to achieving what is set out, raising awareness to staff, and most importantly, the point that the energy policy will be reviewed. But you're probably thinking, where do I begin? You should consider what the structure will be. Will it be a standalone document or merge with a sustainability policy? Policies need to be short and to the point. No one wants to read through pages and pages of document to get to the point. Decide on what will work. Will it be reviewed annually? What should it contain? Should it be more of a formal policy? or a statement of commitment to improving energy efficiency. I will go through some examples of these later. It is important to get senior management on board, as I mentioned earlier, and discuss what the carbon and energy vision is and what targets and objectives could be set, which could be included. The Carbon Trust have found that setting energy policies can help identify cost savings when starting out. They create the foundation for a strategy, demonstrate an environmental commitment to customers and suppliers, and can also provide a backing for procuring of energy efficiency equipment within the business. So here's an example of an energy policy template. So as you can see at the top, it clearly sets out what the commitment is, and on the left showing what the short-term objectives are, as well as on the right the long or medium-term goals. Within this can include specific targets, timelines and practices. Examples of the content of this document could include a general reduce our energy costs, or be more specific and say, for example, that you'll have regular energy audits. So obviously we're coming into ESOS phase 2, so maybe you might comply with that. So that could be something that you could introduce here. It should, as I mentioned before, it should be signed off by the board or senior management and dated, and it should also state when it will be reviewed, for example, annually or every 2 years. So alternatively, you may decide that as well as an energy policy, or instead of, you may prefer a general statement of commitment, outlining what you're committed to and what will be addressed in terms of energy efficiency in areas of the business. Some smaller organisations might not need a specific energy policy as detailed as what I've showed you. An environmental policy and a board level mandate or statement of commitment with a good energy plan may be enough. However, for larger SMEs or organisations, a policy is normally a key component of energy management. So if we move on to the next slide, so developing an energy plan. As I've mentioned, a policy on its own is very unlikely to deliver energy savings. The policy should provide a mandate and a focus for the development of effective energy management strategy or plan. For larger SMEs, a strategy may be of more use for the nature of the business, but for smaller SMEs, a robust energy plan may be more suitable. The strategy or plan should explain why, what, how and when of your energy policy. It should include stakeholder management, targets and principal actions to get there, an action plan, timescales, financial resourcing and the business case, main roles and responsibilities, risks and issues, and reporting and evaluation. So what to consider? The format, appropriate level of management on board, actions to prioritise or easily wins, actions to individuals and clear deadlines, realistic time and budget and authority for approvals and sign-off. An effective strategy will be fairly complex, involving input from a range of people across departments. And a common issue we've found is that for the lead author is gaining this input and ensuring that there is a shared ownership across the business for the strategy for all whom it affects. Senior management support, including the assignment of roles and responsibilities to a range of staff, is important to include in this. A detailed energy plan or strategy according to the size of your business will help identify actions. What actions are needed to be put in place for energy management to come into effect and implement the energy policy. So I've included on the next slide an example, quite a basic example of an energy plan to get you started. It should state a realistic time and budget allocated to individuals and to complete an action. It should be visually be as simple as a list of measure, manage, reduce, report, and manage success. But as I mentioned before, make sure all involved are aware across the business in different departments and engaged of what you're trying to achieve and whether the action is feasible. Like the energy policy, it should be subject to the review process, and edits to the policy must be reflected in the plan and vice versa. Some businesses already have standard processes in place, so maybe it would be useful to use that approach. So moving on to the next part of the webinar, which is what is best practice on data tracking. So a famous quote is that Lord Kelvin said that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, which provides a great way or a great point of why we should track our energy data within a business. Gathering and analysing data is necessary for energy management and can result in cost savings, can develop a business case for purchasing energy efficient investments, and can verify and maximise savings from implemented projects. However, sometimes it's best to take a step back and look at what you're doing currently. So this slide shows 6 steps which may give you a starting point on this. Assess what data you currently have. Don't be afraid to talk to colleagues or someone in your team. They may already be tracking data or energy and you are unaware of this. A common thing is that we should look at our procurement. Are you being billed to the correct tariff? Sometimes suppliers just bill to a default tariff, so please be aware to check that. Collect the data using the best method for your business, by month, by quarter, preferably by month. Collecting data via a portal is a great way to track and store your data, but it may be you just need a simple spreadsheet which works for all. Once you have your data in appropriate fashion that suits your business, analyse it. Look for areas of saving. For example, could you reduce the heating and cooling times or switch off any electricals during the night? Maybe switch off any lighting that's not in use, and use natural light in certain areas. This could be a great opportunity to get employees involved with what could save energy. And the last point, generate targets, strategies to reach them, and get others involved in trying to achieve them. So as I mentioned before, sometimes it's best to take a step back and look at what you're currently doing. I think at this point it's important to go through what to look for and consider with your current data setup. First, make sure you check your invoices. Are you being billed to estimate or actuals? You should be being billed to actuals. If you're not, then please do contact your supplier. Sometimes the setup of the metering can be very complicated across the site, especially in manufacturing areas, or especially if there's tenants involved. Are you being overcharged on your bill? Is your standing charge too high? Please do check these. Sometimes, as I mentioned, sometimes suppliers bill by default, so please do check and analyse your bills. Are you aware of what meter is associated with what bill? Sometimes it's a bit confusing what meter the bill is representing, so please do check this. The meter serial number should help you identify this. If you're being billed to estimates, then maybe check your meter reads. Are they being taken internally? If so, by whom? And do they match what's on the bill? If not, then you should be sending them to your suppliers or getting your suppliers involved. An alternative is to installing sub-metering across the site. This can help identify what area or equipment is consuming. And if advanced metering is installed, it can help identify savings. Are you aware if your site already has currently has sub-metering? And do you know what meter is feeding what? This may help if you've got a tenant in building, this may help by billing your tenants accordingly. The government mandated installation by energy suppliers of smart energy meters in all domestic and non-domestic, smaller non-domestic premises by 2020. Are you aware if you have a smart meter, and is it half-hourly capable? As I mentioned, it's mandated by the government, so please do contact your supplier if you're unsure and want more details. Having one will really reveal how energy is used throughout the day on site, as well as patterns of energy usage and where savings can be made. Once you understand the data and see what your site is doing and what it is using, it is much easier to set targets. So I thought I would show an example of how half-hourly data or sub-metering may be beneficial in a business. So this is an example of a site that the Carbon Trust was monitoring. And it's an example of an office of approximately 300 employees. And following routing maintenance of the HVAC system, the controls of the main system did not operate as they were supposed to, with the cooling, ventilation and the associated system being left on for 24/7. This resulted in a substantial amount of energy usage out of hours, especially through the main circulating pumps. This was identified through routine checks on the HalfHourly data, and the issue could clearly be seen, whereas with manual meter checks, you would not be able to identify this out of hours consumption, and you wouldn't be able to pinpoint the case of what's going on. This saved approximately 8.5k a year, hopefully, and continue to monitor this. Another example of analysing data can be found in the data set shown on your screen. An office of approximately 180 employees, so slightly lower than the previous example, with access to HalfHourly data. During the heating season, it was quickly identified that the heating system was being controlled by both the time schedules as well as weather optimization controls. So there was a potential for improvement here. Comparing the data to the office occupancy and as well as weather data, it was determined that there could be an adjustment to the optimizer, which would enable the system to run more effectively. This would not affect current comfort levels in the office, and it would just require the altering of the start-stop schedule of the heating. The dashed line on the graph shows the week before adjustment, frequently starting very early in the morning and overrunning in the afternoon. The bold blue line shows the system after adjustment, adapting more effectively to the weather by switching on later than the standard timing schedules required and switching off early in the day. Both of the weeks had similar weather and occupancy, as well as activity levels were fairly consistent. This saved approximately £51 a week from gas, as well as additional energy savings from just reducing the runtime on their HVAC system. So getting more into the technical side of things, I thought I would point out a few energy saving technical actions that you could be identified at your site. And you may be able to adjust if you think are necessary or suitable. So check the temperature in your server room. It can often be too cold and you're using more energy than required. Check if the insulation of the building is suitable. So typically 15% of building heat loss can be through drafts. So sorting that out will improve staff comfort. Check your timings on your HVAC system. Like the previous example, can they be changed, adapted to suit occupier arrival and departure times? Check timings on equipment. Some offices have zip tapped their water heaters that they're being heated continuously through the night, so please do check these. Check if your building management system or BMS is set up correctly. Any system linked to the BMS typically represents 40% of a building's energy usage, and if lighting is included in this setup, then it can reach up to 70%. So please make sure that if you have a BMS, it's programmed and commissioned correctly. Similar to the example beforehand, put timers on equipment which can automatically be switched off outside of working hours. The images on the right are from examples of our energy audits at site, or from our Green Business Fund energy audits. So moving on to setting reduction targets. So as I mentioned throughout the webinar, targets can be included in the energy plan to meet the energy policy, and without correct and accurate data, it can be difficult to set an achievable target. And how this all links together. So on the screen, I've outlined some points how to set an achievable target. So the target needs to be relevant to your organisation. Make sure it is clear where the accountability lies. Reliable data, I personally think, is most important. If the data is accurate, the process to setting and achieving the target can be much easier. Document the data. I mentioned earlier that you may be able to store your data by different means, for example, spreadsheets or portal, but make sure this is clear so it can be verified. Include timelines on when you're going to track your progress. Make sure the target has a boundary and make sure it is well defined so it is easy to understand and use. And look at your competitors. Is your target comparable with them, or alternatively achievable with previous data collected? So I think you're probably thinking, what do I do? So decide on your boundary. For example, what sites will this apply to? What operations will this apply to? Gather enough data, as I mentioned before, so you can establish a baseline. Please make sure that you have a complete year of data which has no gaps and shows a realistic example of operations at your site during that year. Do not use a year which, for instance, you have limited or no power at your site, or was a tenanted building that had no tenants in. Decide on your benchmark. Examples of this include turnover, floor area, number of product of units produced, whatever you think is more suitable for your business. Calculate your energy intensity, your kilowatt hour per your benchmark, and you'll then be able to set your target based on this and track and report going forward, reporting progress as you go. It is important to set a target to the SMART framework. So as you can see on the bottom of the screen, S stands for specific, significant, stretching. M stands for measurable, meaningful, motivational. A, agreed upon, attainable, achievable, acceptable. R, realistic, relevant, reasonable, rewarding. T, time-based, time-bound, timely, tangible, and trackable. If you require any assistance with your target setting, please do contact us and we should be able to assist you in that. So I think another thing that's extremely important is getting your employees engaged and wanting to participate in achieving energy efficiency and reducing energy consumption. So bringing awareness and cultural change can achieve the previously mentioned sections. This isn't actually a low or no capital cost to do. The first point is to identify key staff who would be suitable to bring energy management on board and integrated. Different companies will have different preferred communication channels which they prefer to use. This opens up discussions with staff and creates feedback on what measures are effective. As you can see on the screen, the Carbon Trust have found through experience and through the Green Business Fund services that 5 to 15% of energy savings can be achieved through better energy management, through better employee engagement. You're probably again now thinking, what can I do with that? That's all theory based. What can I do? So I've provided some examples on what you can do to get your employees engaged. As I mentioned before, different companies have different ways of communicating awareness. So maybe use your emails, highlight things that are being communicated in the news. For example, the encouragement of using coffee cups and water bottles is a popular topic currently. Workshops, maybe drop-in centres or sessions for those members of staff, for all members of staff, or specific sessions for energy related staff which can gain insight on energy saving measures. Quizzes and surveys may be suitable, getting staff involved by increasing their knowledge and awareness to what you're aiming to do within the business. Green champions, this will depend on the size of your business. Most large organisations have employees that want to go beyond and above their job description, which could help the company reduce its impact. Maybe smaller companies will have employees that just want to participate in reducing energy consumption. Communicating via notice boards or team meetings. Some of our listeners may have gone through a service provided through the Green Business Fund, so don't be afraid to communicate this to the company, and which may bring forward employees who are naturally interested in energy efficiency and sustainability. You could also focus on aspects not only in the workplace but at home too. Maybe encourage employees to check if they have a smart meter at home, or to check their energy bills if they're being billed to estimates. This encourages to promote best practice at home also. To start to develop a long-term strategy, habits of employees and tenants don't change overnight. So communication is vital to kind of drive discussion. Behaviour should be monitored. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, you cannot manage what you don't measure. So feedback is extremely important. Encouraging employees to communicate what is working well or not, and also to generate an environment where staff start to feel like what they're doing is reducing energy consumption. So the next slides show next steps for successful energy management. So as I mentioned before, you could put all this in place, and then if you don't measure and continue to implement and upgrade energy management, then that can be difficult. So as I mentioned before, communication is essential to continue the momentum of energy management within a business. I mentioned that the internal communication, there is internal communication needed, but there is also externally too. I've highlighted some benefits of why communication is important to promote energy management externally as well as internally. So externally, maybe publishing a report, kind of getting a external communication campaign started. This may having an energy policy, a plan, kind of a green way of working may implement customers to choose a green alternative. Investors may want to see the business managing their environmental impact. And communities may also have concerns on how a local business or SME affects the environment. So as I mentioned before, internally, what you're doing internally can also promote staff members communicating that externally. So highlight success stories of colleagues that have done this. Staff may appreciate positive working conditions and increased productivity if you're trying to communicate with them and promote sustainable working. Highlight poor performance, obviously sensitively, but that may encourage improvement. And it also may help develop a culture supportive of energy efficiency and energy management. So all what I've mentioned beforehand, remember this approach through data, target setting, employee engagement. You can also apply this to travel, water and waste. As mentioned previously, energy may be more suited as part of a subsection of a company's sustainability policy, but make sure you include travel, water and waste where necessary. So I've spoken quite a bit through what the Green Business Fund, I've referred to the Green Business Fund throughout the webinar, so I'm just going to go through what it is, what services we provide under the fund. So the Green Business Fund, or the GBF as it's known as, is a scheme operated by the Carbon Trust to contribute to improve sustainability and energy efficiency. As shown in the diagram on the left-hand side, the scheme currently serves SMEs in England, Scotland and Wales. In addition to SMEs, schools, sole traders and charities are included, but not domestic properties, public sectors or new builds. We go by the UK government definition of an SME, and the business should meet two of the following criteria. So no more than 250 employees, an annual turnover not in excess of 25.9 million, or annual balance sheet not in excess of 12.9 million, and not more than 25% owned of an entity that does not meet that criteria. So as I mentioned, there are a few services that, well, a combination of advice, training, and there's also a direct capital contribution to purchasing energy efficiency equipment through the Green Business Fund. So I'll go through a few of the services that we offer now. So one of the first services we offer is energy efficiency training through workshops. So this includes a 2-hour workshops across the country, hosted by a Carbon Trust partner and delivered by a Carbon Trust consultant. So the purpose of it is to understand energy consumption, identify low, no, and low cost measures, and it's aimed at companies with less than 50 employees. So on the right hand side, I thought I'd mention some upcoming upcoming workshops. So the first one is in Swansea on the 21st of February, Skegness on the 14th of March, and Alton on the 18th of April. So if you are interested in coming along to the workshop, then please do apply and register via the link at the bottom. So another example or another service we provide through the Green Business Fund is called the Opportunity Assessment, or essentially it's an energy audit. So depending on your energy spend, it can be either remote or on site. It's delivered by a Carbon Trust engineer, and the purpose of it is to identify the top 3 costed energy saving recommendations. It comes in a form of a report, and next steps to realise energy savings is included. So that is available for SMEs in all qualifying geographies. So if you can have this instead of or as well as an opportunity assessment, but you could also decide to go down implementation advice. So if you've got a project in mind, let's just say lighting, for instance, you want to upgrade your lighting, we are offering up to 5 days support from a Carbon Trust consultant that have a project in mind and that are ready for investment. So we would invite suppliers from our accredited suppliers list to generate proposals and quotes for you, get them down to site to compile these reports, and then we would independently review them and give you our opinion on what is the better proposal. It's then completely up to you if you wish to contract with that supplier and go ahead and implement. If you decide to, then there's also currently an opportunity for you to get a capital contribution. So currently the fund is offering 15% towards the total cost of the energy saving equipment, with the maximum being funded as £5,000 and the minimum is £750. So that means your project cost has to be at least £5,000. So this should be, if the payback, this is offered, so 15% of the project cost will be offered if the payback is less than 5 years. So we're increasingly seeing technology such as solar PV coming through as well. So there is an opportunity for you to have capital contribution if you're eligible, but this is calculated slightly differently. So it's 15% of 5 times the annual cost savings if the payback is more than 5 years. So there is a few kind of rules for you for the project to be eligible. So the previously mentioned eligibility, and a project should be delivered by a Carbon Trust accredited supplier. So on the right is our Carbon Trust Green Business Directory, and all projects should be delivered through them. Evidence, we need evidence. So there's an application that you can fill in online, and that you need to provide some documentation towards, and before we can transfer the funds we need to have evidence to say that the work has been completed. And an important thing to mention here is that we can't retrospectively fund projects. So this is projects that are eligible for capital contribution need to be through design through to install. So there is a few more funds that I'll quickly mention through the Green Business Fund. So we've got a virtual energy manager, which kind of goes into more detail of what I've shown in today's webinar. It's shown as 6 structured and tailored modules of the previously mentioned of modules, and scheduled regular interviews over the telephone and kind of engagement through webinars or via email. We also have a variety of other technical webinars. So we've had one on lighting, one on HVAC systems, and they're delivered by one of the technical member of the Carbon Trust, and they typically last for 45 minutes. There is also more up-to-date publications on the Carbon Trust website for SMEs with information for you to reduce your energy consumption. So they're free to download on the Carbon Trust website. So the current ones on there at the moment is HVAC, lighting, how to be a good supplier, carbon footprinting, and renewable energy sources. So you can just go to the Carbon Trust website at the bottom of the screen and look into them there. So we're also developing some new services to come out of the Green Business Fund. So one that's coming soon and is due to be launched in spring 2018 is the Organisational Carbon Footprint Calculator. So it aims to support SMEs to report their carbon footprint. It includes some of the most common emission sources, such as electricity, gas, and fuel consumption in their emissions. And the idea is that SMEs will be able to report their footprint in line with widely recognised standards, and the output will follow the GHG protocol. The tool also includes step-by-step instructions and guidelines, and it will be accessible via web browsers and smartphones. So this example is kind of a preview of what it will look like on the right. So I thought I would also include kind of a network that the Carbon Trust manage, who kind of have forums and discussions on the following subjects: so energy, carbon footprinting, policy and legislation, finance, employee engagement, events, renewables, water and waste, and you can engage with approximately 2,000 existing members, and it's free to sign up via the following link. So I've come to the end of my webinar today. I wonder if we've got any questions.
Thanks very much, Charlotte, for that. Asked, can you apply for the grant more than once, i.e. more than one project? Charlotte?
You can, but the maximum that we can fund is £5,000. So if you have a lighting project and you would be eligible for a £2,000 for funding, then obviously the next project you'd only get up maximum £3,000.
Thank you, Charlotte. Our next question comes from Megan Hand, and she's asking, with regards to the GBF, could we acquire funds for solar panels if we meet the requirements of an SME?
The answer is yes, you can apply for solar panels. Typically, we see paybacks of more than 5 years for solar panels. So as I mentioned before, normally we would calculate it, typically we would calculate it as 15% of 5 times the annual cost savings. But yes, if you meet the requirements of the SME, you provide all the documentation needed for the capital contribution process, yes, solar panels are eligible.
Thanks, Charlotte. And we have another question from Abdul Muttalib Yusuf, and his question is, do you have a session on the ISO 50001 energy management system?
I don't believe there's one in the calendar yet. There was, I know, last week an ESOS webinar, which included ISO 50001. I'm sure that'll be going online soon. So yeah, if I think after, as Penny said, if you send that through, we can put you in touch with someone that's ISO 50001 that looks after that.
Okay,